Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of SuperCoach, mates. Well, the gather round is done and dusted, which means that all the clubs are now back to playing their matches in their home states again. Um, so, obviously, with that, for those of you who have checked, and I'm sure most of you are aware, so just before we get in, just want to quickly mention that you might have noticed that some of the players have had positions added to their listings. So I think Harry Sheasel is now defender eligible. I think Cam McKenzie is now forward eligible. So it might be a good idea at this stage just to quickly go through and check your sides.
Yeah,
And if you've got anyone who is now DPP eligible, because you might have second thoughts about trading them, or you might decide to move them into a different position depending on what eligibility they've gained. Um, but anyway, so we're going to move into our versus series now that we've got that quick disclaimer out of the way. So it's just Thomas tonight. Jonas unfortunately cannot join us. So the first versus here. So Jordan Dawson and Tom Stewart. I personally think these two, outside of Nick Dacos, will probably be the top two defenders by the end of the year. Um, so what do we think about these two? So there is obviously a bit of a price difference. I think Dawson now is up to like 655k or something, and I think Stewart's just around the 600k mark. So what are we doing with regards to these two, Thomas, as plans for the future going forward?
well, just quickly before I go to a deep dive with these two, just before I forget off the bat, we are still running that giveaway that myself and Jonas talked about last week. So that's still going ahead. So the winners will be announced on our Anzac Day weekly recap at the end of next week, or start of next week, really. So we've got a few people applied through the last, or a few people entered through the last video, which was great to see. But we'll roll it across this one as well. So same things apply. So like and subscribe and comment your favourite team, and that'll put you into the entering. So like and subscribe at the end of this video. We'd comment on your favourite team, and that will put you into the raffle. So just for those who are wondering, I had a few messages asked. Those shoes that was kindly gifted us, they're a size 8. So it might be a bit small for some people, but there is definitely resale value there. So it can make it a bit of a quick cash there. If that's the case, and obviously AFL gift vouchers, stock standard. So good luck, and we'll keep that running through this week, and then like and subscribe and comment on this video. You can feel free to do the last video if you really want to, but this video is on. We'll collate the entries at the end of the round and end of the Anzac Day round. But to answer your question, Nathan, with regards to Dawson Stewart, I was lucky enough to bring in Dawson last week and reap the benefits of his 152. He's been moved to the midfield and he's just dominated. Yet to be seen how he might look like if opposition midfielders start paying a bit of attention to him tagging wise, but he just seems to flourish wherever he plays. He's so elite by foot that it's ridiculous, and he just gets the ball and is real damaging. Whereas Stewart, you can't go much wrong either. I would argue out the two, probably a bit safer just with Dawson because of durability issues. He's obviously had the plantar fascia injury for Stewart last season, had another issue at the start of this season, and he's got a habit of scoring a few low 90s, especially when he has to be more accountable on those small forwards. So I think if you were forced to pick between the two, you pick Dawson. But if you have Dawson, get Stewart next best option. Obviously had the 69 break even this week, which he smashed against West Coast. He's got a tough one against Sydney, so I wouldn't be surprised if he got gifted the unfortunate task of manning Papley a little bit. But he still scores well, and I think that's the way to go out of those two. But Dawson, for me, I think he's a must-have if you haven't already, and he's probably worth the price tag because he's got DPP as well. It's kind of handy, and he just scores for fun. I think even though he doesn't look likely at times, he just finds a way, and playing midfield helps as well.
Yeah, so I'm much the same. I think Dawson is is a must-have. I think I could man a case to say he's the best player in the league right now.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any player who has his kicking ability outside of perhaps Nick Dacos. Definitely bias there.
Yeah.
But even still, he is an absolute class above everyone else. And yeah, as Thomas alluded to, the thing with Dawson is that he's just so damaging with his foot. He barely misses a target, and he's not doing little, dinky 20-meter passes. He's doing proper, like, 40, 50-meter kicks
Yeah.
and hitting forwards lace out.
Oh,
And that's a champion data gold mine, that sort of stuff. So, yeah, I definitely think Dawson is a must-have. The only problem is he's 655k. So he's gone up 50k, and I think his break even's around the 100 mark. In fact, his break even's 54. So he's probably going to be nudging 700k at this rate. Which, if you had have told me that before round 1 that he'd be 700k after round 6, I would have started him instead of Doherty, but I didn't. So I guess it's the old you win some, you lose some. But yeah, if you've jumped on Dawson, you'd be wrapped with how it's going. And Stewart, I still think Stewart is a must-have, and perhaps I would even argue that if you're going to go one of these two now, you'd probably be going towards Stewart just
yeah.
because of the price differential. Because Stewart's break-even, Stewart's break-even's 121. So there is that to keep in mind. But yeah, you can't argue with both of these guys. I think they'll both be probably top 3, top 4 by the end of the year. So I don't think you can really go wrong with either of them.
No.
But I think for price, I think I'd be leaning towards Stewart. But if you want just the absolute best player, I'd be going for Dawson out
Yeah.
of these two. Cool. Right, moving on to the next one. So Took Miller, obviously Gold Coast under the pump at the minute. I think the next 4 weeks are pivotal for them, and obviously Lockie Neal sort of perhaps took advantage a bit of the fact that North Melbourne were just non-existent defensively. So which way are you leaning towards in this battle here, Thomas?
Probably for me, Miller. He's one that I'm actually looking at myself to bring in this week. For Mackenzie and Ginby. He's one that, flew under the radar a little bit. I mean, I wrote it up in our Patreon write-up for this round that I think a lot of people got scared off with his hamstring concerns, and he just hasn't shown any sign of slowing down. 26 disposals, 8 clearances, just a clearance beast, and he's a fitness king as well. So runs through the matches really well, and he's just untaggable in a sense that he just finds a ball, enough of the ball that he's just going to score consistently for you. Just Mr. Reliable. And it'll just be a bonus when Witts comes back. He'll get the hit outs to advantage to someone like Miller. So I'd say it's definitely worth that price tag bringing in. Neil, a little bit more bullish on, obviously dominated against a North midfield that lost Simpkin pretty early on, so pretty decimated pretty quickly. 37 disposals, 13 clearances. This is probably the first time that I saw in the parts of the matches I watched that someone like a Dunkley helped him a fair bit. Just allowed him to get the clearances a lot easier. Having a bigger body around him helped. Whether or not he can do it consistently is another thing. I'd say you're probably chasing points a little bit with him because they played North. But he's one that, we all know what he's capable of in the fact that he's very capable of going 180s out of the blue quite easily, whereas Miller's more your consistent 120, 130 week in, week out. So I'd just say that you could probably pay up for a little bit for Miller. He'd be worthwhile. He's just so consistent. He plays North himself this weekend, so who knows? He could get a 180 as well. So I think I'd probably pick Miller just for consistency's sake out of the two. But they're both good options, 100%. How about yourself?
Well, I'm actually going to disagree with you here, and I'm actually going to go side with Lockie Neal here. And it's actually mainly the reason you just alluded to, which is the arrival now of Josh Dunkley. I think I know it's only one game, but I think we're really going to start seeing his impact with Lachie Neale in terms of what he can do with the ball. So I think you are chasing points by doing it, but I still think out of these two, I think I'd be leaning towards Neil. He's in the better side, and one of the biggest problems with the Gold Coast Suns right now is that they can't run out second halves of games. So I think they're the worst second
Yeah.
half side in the league, and part of the reason for that is that not Neil, sorry, Miller, Rowell, and Anderson are taking 80% of the Gold Coast Suns centre bounce, like their centre bounce stuff, which means that they're getting really tired late on in games because it's obviously grueling going to contest all the time. So I think the only logical way I can see that that's going to happen is that they're going to have to start sharing that midfield load around a bit more, which means you might see guys like like your Lakosha's going in there, your Rosa's going in there, um David Swallow going through there. I'd even consider chucking Brandon Ellis in there just for a couple. So I just think with that dynamic and the fact that that is just so out of proportion with what pretty much every other side's doing, that I'm just a little bit concerned that if they do decide to start splitting around that midfield a bit more, that his scoring might dry up a bit because he might be pushed into a wing or to a half forward. Whereas with Lachie Neale, I know that Lachie Neale is pretty much going to be the stable at pretty much every centre bounce. And the advantage with him is that he can go forward and he can still impact in the forward line. So for that matter alone, I'm slightly leaning towards Neil, but I will completely support you and say I think both are great picks.
Yeah.
But just for this, I'm just going to support Neil for this one.
Nah, that's understandable.
So moving on. So we've got Roberts here from Sydney and Johnson from Fremantle. Now, I could not pick these two out of a military lineup. I'm not going to lie. So what are we doing with these two? So I could see here that this Roberts person looks like he's a rookie.
Yeah.
And Johnson is a little bit of a
rookie as well.
He's a rookie as well. I think he's a little bit more risky. So, but as I said, I'm going to leave this one with you because I could not pick these two out of a military lineup.
So obviously these are two bubble boys looking at price rises next week. So they're obviously downgrade targets. That's why I've put them in there for. It's an interesting one. Roberts played all right, actually. 93 SuperCoach points for 400 disposals is a very, very good return. Played on a wing and looked pretty confident. Obviously, against Richmond, your Tigers didn't look too great and they leaked points like crazy. I think he's probably the one to pick out of the two between Roberts and Johnson. I think Johnson is a little bit more riskier selection-wise. It obviously did help that Freo beat Gold Coast, so yeah, helps him selection-wise, but I can't see him lasting long-term. In there, he's obviously a sub-concern as well. Roberts obviously is a sub-concern as well. He was a sub for basically all of the first couple games, and his role's a bit all over the place, but he looked all right against Richmond. If he can hold his spot, that's the big thing, but I think you probably have to make that decision yourselves depending on who you've got. So if you've got McKenzie and Ginbey, those guys need to go ASAP just because, Ginbey got subbed off with a shit score and McKenzie got shit all with his sub score as well. So I think those guys just need to be gone. And you just got to hope, fingers crossed, that your likes of Roberts and Johnson can play. But I'd pick Roberts out the two at a better game. He's capable of scoring those higher scores, which is really impressive, which is what you want from those rookies, to be able to be capable of scoring your 80s and 90s at the flash of the pan kind of thing to help cash gen. And he's won because he's had such terrible scores because of being a sub. This 93 actually didn't really impact his price that much. It was only $7K more expensive than his starting price. You'd almost take that and then take the instant cash he's going to get from the 93. But I guess we'll move on swiftly, Nate, if you want to move past that one. Continue.
Yeah,
Don't have
I
to say about
haven't.
those two.
Yeah. So, obviously, Tim English, is just flying at the minute. I think he's actually the number one scorer overall. And I'm presuming that's Samson Ryan from
Samson
Richmond.
Ryan, yeah.
Which in our private chat, well, there was a bit going off about this guy. I think on Friday night when he started off so well and then he basically crumbled like Richmond did.
Yeah.
So I'll just quickly say yes. I think it's too late to get Tim English. I think he's north of 670k. I think if you're doing that at this stage, I think you can probably get someone who can probably do the same thing for a little bit less. And Samson Ryan, I think as long as Nankervis is out, I think he'll keep playing and keep scoring.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if he can improve his output though, but time will tell on that. But yeah, what do you think here?
Yeah, English I think is a bit too late. Obviously he's had an amazing start to the season, and he just dominates week in week out. Obviously played I think Luddams on the weekend. Not Luddams, Lysette, which is a pretty easy run through for him. He's got a tough one I think against Darcy, not particularly just purely against Darcy, but he's got the double up against Jackson. So I don't know if Freo will have a plan in place to kind of negate him, but it'll be interesting to see. It'd be pretty risky to pay a lot of money to bring him in, and then he busts up that week against Freo with a double up ruck. So who knows what happens, but I think Nathan's right. Paying a shit ton of cash, you may as well just upgrade elsewhere and cop your losses and hope for the best. You can pick him up later. Ryan's interesting. I think myself and Jonas both picked him up. Looked actually pretty good early on, did some pretty good things in the ruck, and then just absolutely fell off a cliff in the second and last quarter. But then for whatever reason, he basically doubled his score in a quarter as well. So I think he just needs the opportunity to flourish in that ruck a little bit. They played Miller a bit more, maybe trying to be a bit mobile around the ground with someone against Luddins, but Miller looked horrendous. Could not ruck to save his life. He had no second or third efforts at the ball. At least Ryan had a bit of tap work going for him. He's obviously got the extremely hard task on Monday night against Gordon and Grundy. So if he play, he should play considering Nank's not there, but he'll need some support. But I think he's one that will be tick along until Nank comes back, and as soon as he does that, just flick him on. But he's one that I think it's worthwhile just because it's worthwhile having someone there for him. But yeah, I guess it'd probably be too late to pick him as well. He didn't look that convincing on the weekend either. So yeah, if you got him, great. But English as well, you both probably pass on. If you're forced to pick one of them because you had ruck issues, I'd probably just go Ryan and play him up forward as well. And DPP, if you're really struggling, if you've injured ruck, I'd probably look elsewhere. But if you had the money, go English because you know what you're getting from him week in, week out anyway.
Yeah, so just to back up this English, so right now he's averaging 139 points, which I believe the highest average in SuperCoach is 140, and that was Gary Ablett 1 year. So if you think he can maintain this 140 scoring for the rest of the year, by all means go and get him. But I think the highest the Ruckman's ever averaged was probably Gorn or Grundy, and I reckon that's about the 120 mark.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think you're paying a lot for someone who I don't think can maintain that scoring. But I guess time will tell with English. And yeah, I think Ryan, I think you've missed the boat on him. I couldn't even tell you how much he is now. But yeah, I think if he was a rookie and he's played his third game, yeah, I probably would be steering clear. So Zach Butters, who I think everyone had last year and frustrated the living hell out of everyone. And Toby Green, someone else who a lot of people have had in the past and frustrated the living bejesus out of them. So obviously Butters was I think the match winner along with my mate Horn Francis in Port Adelaide's win, and Toby Green was probably arguably one of the better players on the ground for the Giants. So what do we think going forward with Butters? Can he keep up this sort of performance, or is that a bit of a flash in the pan, do you think?
Yeah, probably a flash in the pan. It did help that he pretty much played full-time mid from what I'm aware when I saw the match. Yeah, we know what he's capable of when he plays full-time. I just don't think it's consistent enough. His body really doesn't hold up in that role. But yeah, he was huge. 146 SuperCoach points is massive for 32 disposals, 7 clearances, 1 goal. You wouldn't be complaining. It's just the ceiling. I mean, the ceiling's there, but the consistency's not, unfortunately. Green's an interesting one. Didn't really watch the Hawthorn GWS game as much as I probably should have, but it was a good game nonetheless from the back end of it. But yeah, Green looked very lively from what I saw. Definitely helps. I'm pretty sure he's captain, isn't he? This year. So
Yeah, he is the sole captain.
Yeah, definitely stepped up in the leadership position. But having a look at his SuperCoach scores across the first 5 rounds, he's only gone under 90 once. Granted, it was a 40, so it was pretty bad. But other than that, he's been very, very consistent. He'd be a decent pod if you're strapped for cash. And if you want to ride, he's a really good player to watch as an owner. So as not like I'm not in it right now, but in the past I've been, he's a really fun player to watch. If you want to go down that route, go for it. Out of the two, I'd almost lean towards Green. I don't want to go out on a limb here, but I'd almost go Green for a bit of fun because Butters, yeah, it's been other than this game, unless Ken Hinkley decides to put him full-time mid and is impressed with what he saw, his last 4 games are trash. So I'd probably go Green as a bit of a differential with his price point. Yeah, what are your quick thoughts before we move on?
Yeah, so I think Butters, as I said, I think Butters and Horn Francis were the match winners. I think they both had, 11 disposals, I think 4 clearances, and I think obviously Butters got his goal in the last quarter. So a lot of his, I guess, disposals and clearances came when the game was on the line, which I guess is a good thing because it means that obviously how the scoring works is it's weighted depending on what stage of the game it's in. So obviously goals and clearances and stuff are worth more when the game's close as opposed to when it's, a blowout. So
Yeah.
I think that massively helped him and probably Jason as well with their scoring. So I think it was a bit of a flash in the pan in that sense. But in saying that, I still can't trust Toby Green because I think if you can get under his skin, which is not hard to do with Toby, I think you can shut him out of the game. Although I think this year, given that he is now the sole captain, I think his temperament has improved a lot this year. Given that he's pretty much now the sole leader of that forward line. And a lot of the players look for him when he makes his, 50, 60 meter lead sort of up to that half forward wings role. So a lot of ball does go through him, which does help him. But if you get the right player on him, like a Maynard or a Tom Stewart or someone like that who can match him pace and also can have a bit of grunt about them, I think his scoring can really suffer. So I think with Toby, I think it's a matter of just waiting for the right time to pick him up. But yeah, I'm actually slightly going to lean towards you, I think, and I'm going to go with Toby. But I think this decision would probably be like one of those flash in a pan where if, say, you had the 6 forwards and it was round 22, and you were stuck with these 2 as your only choices, basically, which one would you take? I would probably lean towards Toby just because I think he's got more big game scoring than what Butters does. But yeah, I mean, I think both are probably the next rung down, I'd say, from the top sort of 6 to 10 forwards. Not that there's much of them, but anyway. So trading in. So this is trade or avoid. So should we trade in 500k mids to reinvest money elsewhere? What do you think of this statement, Thomas?
probably, I want to say underrated, but probably is overrated at the end of the day. But yeah, I'll go underrated, spiced up a bit. Just because I don't think you look at like Olivers and stuff and Lairds, they really haven't been hitting the 130s, 140s consistently. I guess you're paying for the consistencies of 120 plus, but I've just put two up there, Sarong and Merritt. Merritt's probably blown up this week against Melbourne, finally shown what he's capable of, but Sarong's one that's been super consistent. I think there's enough players in that 500k plus range or 500 to 550 range that really can help you a little bit. Price-wise, if you're strapped for cash, obviously you want to be looking at the top 8 to 10 mids, sorry. So you don't want to gamble on too many, but I think if you're strapped for cash and you need, an extra 50k, 60k elsewhere to help you out, it's definitely, a play to take a Sarong, take a risk on Merit, something like that, and hope they can finish off top 6 to 10, 8 to 10, which they have done in the past. And you probably boost that 60k elsewhere, but it really depends on structure. But I'd say it's a bit underrated. I think there's a time and place for when you must pick a top end premium, i.e. Dawson's one of them at the moment and Stewart. But in the midfield, you can take a bit of a gamble at the moment. I think, those top enders are, you just have to look at Steele, for example. He was at 600k and really didn't fire to start the season off. And Laird struggled to get going. I mean, only got going, obviously, on the weekend, scored 135, but he hasn't been going too flash either. So, yeah, I'd say it's a little bit underrated, picking those players up at a bit cheaper price and then reinvesting elsewhere.
Yeah, well, I'm actually going to side with you here on this one as well. The only reason I'm saying that is because eventually it always happens at some point where these top line midfielders, they always fall below 600k. I think the only one I can think of last year who didn't fall was Oliver and Land. I think the cheapest Oliver got was about 615. And I think Roy Laird basically didn't go below his starting price all of last year. So in terms of that, I think at some stage you're going to get those top liners for under 600k. So effectively they become the 500k mids. It just might take a little bit longer. But given the fact that they all seem to be sort of maintaining their averages and break evens and stuff, then they're not really falling. Yeah, I think this particular one now, just with these types of players like your Merritts, your Sarongs, I had a look at Pendlebury's in there. Your mate Mason Woods now in that 500k range is 500 on the dot. So you've got Petrarca, Crips, McRae, Callum Mills. So yeah, so there's all these guys in that sort of 500k range who have started higher and have fallen, and if they can regather their form, then they're ripe for the picking. I think at that price, which is so obviously I think this is an underrated statement, especially because most of the top liners end up falling into this category anyway.
Nah, 100%.
So keep versus trade or overrated versus underrated. So trading out mid prices who are close to their break evens, but they're still scoring well. They're still scoring well enough to maintain them. What do you think about doing this?
Probably a bit overrated. So yeah, just reading that question. Overrated in the fact that I understand where you're coming from with regards to why you trade them out, because you want to get your Took Millers in. But if they're scoring well enough, I just keep them in. I don't see why you'd burn a trade. I understand they might be close, they break even. Maybe as soon as they hit that 60, you might want to fling it off. But if they're hitting 90s, close to 100, like you look at the examples I've used of Setterfield and Wood, they both went just below 100. So I just, bank it for now and just get them ticking along. It's as long as they're making a little bit of cash here and there, or they're stagnating but not dropping, I keep them there because they're well worth it. They're basically scoring just maybe 10 points under premium. Saves you 2 trades to get up to you took Miller's and Oliver's. But I'd say it's fair enough. I think they deserve the spot in the side, and you picked them for a reason. You look at Bryson Wood; he's gone from 350 to 500. Setterfield's close to that. And they keep delivering week in, week out. Like we thought the Mason would fall off a cliff against Collingwood. He almost scored a ton there. Setterfield was tagging Oliver, and he still almost scored 100 there. So they're doing their dues, and I think you just keep them on until they start showing consistency and poorer scoring. But what are your thoughts on that one, Nath?
Yeah, so I'm the same. Normally, my rule of thumb is that I try not to trade out mid prices until I've got all the rookies off the field. And then worry about that. Obviously, the exception to that rule is if they have a long-term injury. But someone like Mason Wood or Setterfield, you can just keep them, and does it really matter if they have a 80 game and then they have another 80 game and they fall 20k? At the end of the day, is that going to really matter when you've got a rookie who might be at the top of their price point and they're going to fall 30k if you don't get rid of them? So I guess with that, I guess it's a matter of balancing what your team needs versus the need to upgrade. So that's normally my rule of thumb. So I believe that this statement for me will be overrated.
Yeah.
Because I believe you should be keeping them until you've got all your rookies off the field.
Yeah. All right. Move.
So DPP options should you target? So obviously we mentioned this off the top. So obviously these two now, so Dawson and Zeeble both have DPP. I think there's a whole list available on the Herald Sun website. Well, I think there was on Sunday night anyway, once it got changed. So does this change any of your thinking with regards to some players now that they're DPP eligible?
I might let you expand a little bit on the options available. I think for me personally, I mean, I've got a pretty stock standard side at the moment. Look, I don't think there's anyone that I'm aware of that you should target in particular. I mean, Zeebel's one. I think that if you don't have and you're strapped for cash in a forward perspective, I think you're going to probably at this rate, if he keeps it up, I think you can end up top 6 forward. He's obviously defensive eligible now, so the ability to flip quite well is handy. I think you just got to keep that in mind that if you're not aware already that obviously the DPP actions have been taken into place from obviously this week. So when you're looking at trades, it's obviously helpful to realise that you can flip them between mid and defence like Dawson or a defensive forward like your Zeebles and Sheasel. So at the end of the day, you want those rookies on field that you think you're going to score. And if you're able to utilise your premiums or your players like your DPPs effectively, I think that's really useful and you should be well aware of who's in your team that's DPP eligible so you can make those calls when you are trading to make life a little bit easier. But what are your thoughts, Nathan? Obviously, Sheasel and Zeeble, pretty popular, and so is Dawson. Is anyone that you're looking at now potentially could be a smoky or someone that could be worthwhile bringing in just mainly because of the DPP statuses?
Yeah, so I guess for mine, obviously, there's some players who've obviously moved around positions. So I've got the full list here. So it's on the Herald Sun website. But there are a couple of names who've jumped off at me, and perhaps some of these might be a bit left field. So I'd have to check them out and do a little bit more research on them and sort of how they're scoring. But I think Josh Rushelli's move into the midfield, I think, can't be understated on how well that move has worked. He seems like a natural in that midfield, and he seems to be really having an impact in there. But as I said, I'm not sure on how well he's scoring. But at least from what I've seen of the Adelaide games that I've watched, him and Dawson going in there really added some flair and some pace and some a bit of grunt in there. So I'd be interested to have a look and see what his scoring is. Otherwise, I think that's pretty much or the other one I don't mind the look of if you can keep it up. So obviously, Bailey Smith again is a midfield forward, so I think he now comes into consideration. But with the way the Bulldogs are going at the minute, I'm not really that confident on bringing him in. And the only other one I can think of who might tempt some people now is if you've got Wanganeen Malera. So he's now a defender eligible as well. So if you've kept him and perhaps you know, thinking of moving him on, perhaps it might be worth just to chuck him up in the back line, and just give him another week or so and see how he goes.
Yeah.
But yeah, most of them aren't really super coach relevant. So yeah, that's pretty much that with the DPP. And now it's time for my favorite segment. So this
I'll
is where
let you have the limelight here.
I get to blow up on someone, and I am going after the Carlton Football Club, and in particular their captain, Patrick Crips here. Now, Patrick, okay, so last year your side was the second best side at scoring from clearances. You were basically unstoppable in the first half of the year. All right. Now this year, to start the season, your midfield group is ranked 17th in that same stat. All right. So you've gone from the second best scores from clearance side to being the second worst side at conceding scores from clearances. Now you can't possibly tell me that your midfield got shoved around by, no offense against Adelaide, but Dawson's not the strongest person. Land's a midget, and Rochelle is in his second year of football, and they absolutely creamed your midfield group out of the middle of the park. They made you guys look ridiculously slow. And as soon as they got the ball, they were gone, and your whole midfield was trailing their midfield, who were 20 meters off, not even in the picture anymore. So, Patrick, this is to you and your midfield, all right? If your club want to go anywhere this year, which for about the 8th preseason in a row, everyone's been talking up Carlton as being the next big thing. I know last year people were saying that you were going to win the premiership in April. All right, so use this game as an opportunity to figure out what's going wrong with your midfield, because I'm telling you now, if you don't figure it out, all right, you've got a hungry St Kilda side this week, all right, and they are going to run absolute rings around your midfield if what I saw on Thursday night is any indication of how you and the rest of your midfield group want to play. So, Patrick, my message to you is get on something that can help improve your pace and your speed through the midfield. Because if you stick with this same midfield group, this game could be all over at halftime, because the way St Kilda have been playing at Marvel Stadium this year has been borderline ridiculous. They've basically been toying with sides for the first half and then just running all over the top of them in the second half. So that's my rant for the week.
No, he's going to blow up a fuse by the end of the season. Yeah, good one. Hopefully, for our sake, they don't hear that rant until next week, and we'll beat them up. But I know apparently Adam Sard's gone as well this week potentially, so they could be
And
real.
he only scored 80 as well, Crips. Let's not forget that. Like, he only scored 80, and you know, as I say, you can't tell me the Adelaide midfield is that physically strong. So
No, it's understandable. Anyway, we'll leave it at that and let Nathan recoup before next week. But yeah, hopefully everyone has a good week leading into Anzac round. Obviously, Monday night and Tuesday night. Monday night and Tuesday will be the two Anzac Eve and Anzac Day games. So the round will be pushed a bit further back than normal, so I'll probably have a later podcast because of that. And obviously, as I said, the giveaway will be announced at the end of that round, or essentially when we release the next video live on YouTube. So as I said, if you want to be involved in that, more than welcome to help support the channel a little bit, and we'll give back, as I said. So like and subscribe on this video. Doesn't have to be on the original one. Like and subscribe on this video if you want, and then comment your favorite team. That will put into the running. But other than that, we may or may not post another video. We'll see how we go this week. But until then, good luck for Anzac round, and we'll see you next week.